Part 1, Discovering Permaculture. Lesson 4, The Birth of Permaculture. Permaculture Origins. The permaculture concept has been accredited to David Holmgren and Bill Mollison. Here we will briefly explore the life paths that brought these two pioneers together, and how their life endeavors have laid the foundation of the permaculture movement. Bill Mollison. Bill Mollison was born in 1928 in the small fishing village of Stanley, Tasmania. At the age of 15, Mollison left school to run his family's bakery. In his lifetime, Mollison would try his hand at many trades, most of which in direct contact with nature. Among his many jobs, Mollison was a mill worker, seafarer, animal trapper, and shark fisher. However, his 9 years spent with the Wildlife Survey section of the CSIRO, Australia's leading science research body, gave Mollison his most intimate and informative experiences with nature. In 1968, Mollison became a tutor at the University of Tasmania and later senior lecturer in environmental psychology. Reflecting over those times, Mollison has written, quote, "There seemed to be no positive direction forward. Although almost everybody could define those aspects of the global society that they rejected. These included military adventurism, the nuclear bomb, ruthless land exploitation, the arrogance of polluters, and a general insensitivity to human needs." End quote.
Well, that was an extraordinary grab from Bill, from classic Bill, and it was that big picture understanding, grasp of the facts, but actually quite a willingness to embellish or polish the facts, and a challenging idea thrown out to people to confront people. And he was certainly like that in everything he did. He was sort of quite brazen, and I think over the years he mellowed. I mean, the reputation he had when I met him was quite substantial. At the university, even though I never went to any of his lectures, he had a huge audience at the university, but he'd more than ruffled the feathers of a lot of his colleagues, and he fell out with people very easily. He had a huge ego, and like a lot of people who are creative genius, which he definitely was that, his personal relationships, 5 marriages says something of that. Around the world through the permaculture networks, there are hundreds of incredibly creative people who worked very closely with Mollison over the years since we worked together. And, most of them were in some ways burnt by that relationship with Bill. A lot of them probably ended up sort of hating him for various reasons. A lot of them, even though they were burnt, still, even before his now death, always held a soft spot for him. So he was a difficult character, you'd have to say.
I haven't got any love in me at all, and I hate community. Part of the other thing makes me furious. 2 things, really. Spiritualism, community. People who talk about community want to manage other people, and people don't like being managed. And I grew up in a village, and people say that is a community. Well, it isn't. It's a lot of individuals following the rules. And I find most people who are spiritual are very greedy and very avaricious and waste a hell of a lot of time.
David Holmgren. David Holmgren was born in 1955 in Fremantle, Western Australia. Holmgren's parents were very politically active and no doubt carefully informed and shaped their son's worldviews. In 1973, Holmgren spent a year hitchhiking around Australia, before enrolling in the University of Tasmania's Environmental Design School. Holmgren was deeply attracted to Tasmania's natural and intellectual environment, describing it as, quote, a place where modernity and nature collide, both destructively and creatively, end quote. During Holmgren's time at university, there were many pivotal works and philosophies that were surfacing. Among them included James Lovelock's Gaia theory, Norwegian philosopher and mountaineer Arne Næss's deep ecology, and Rachel Carson's Silent Spring, all presenting to the world ideas of our interconnectedness with nature, how the world can be viewed as a complete living organism, and how our local acts have a global impact. Holmgren was also exposed to the Club of Rome's Limits of Growth, where he was awed to discover that the forest ecosystem builds 10 times more annual topsoil than conventional agriculture. This, combined with the fact that the number one problem and limiting factor of growth the world faces, as cited by the Club of Rome, is the loss of topsoil. This led Holmgren to begin wondering how to remedy the current agricultural system. Later, he wondered to himself, why can't we build a food system like a forest? It was then he brought his musings to his mentor and tutor, Bill Mollison.
Well, the origins of permaculture for me were when I was a design student in Tasmania in the 1970s, studying environmental design in a course that was probably the most radical experiment in tertiary education in Australia's history. And I was at the end of my first year of amazingly free exploratory studies in urban planning, architecture, landscape architecture, and I became interested in the intersection between ecology, landscape architecture and agriculture, which seemed to me something where there was no connection. Sometimes I could see a connection between two of those, but not the three. And I met this amazing man, Bill Mollison, who was actually a senior tutor at the psychology faculty in another institution, and but appeared to me an amazing ecological thinker in the way I thought ecological thinking, what it was about. And I was actually developed this relationship with him, moved into his house, and we were discussing my plans for this focus in my course in the second year. And he said, oh, that's really interesting. He said, how about this for an idea? If mostly nature produces a forest as the most productive and sustainable system across most of the Earth's surface, why doesn't our agriculture look, at least functionally, if not just physically, something like a forest? And I said, oh, that's exactly what I'm interested in. And that became the beginnings of a passionate, full-time, total immersion with Mollison effectively as my informal mentor, no relationship in my academic work, to an intensive study that led to the Permaculture manuscript, which was later published as Permaculture 1 in 1978 and was the starting point of permaculture as a public concept. So it's something that emerged between the two of us at a time when there was a huge wave of interest in what we might call sustainable solutions today. Before the term sustainability actually was in the lexicon, before there was any serious discussion of climate change. But at the time that there was this intense discussion about the limits to growth because of the limits of resources, characterised by the oil crises, and the limits of the environment reflected in pollution and biodiversity loss and land degradation. So permaculture came out of that, what I call that sort of first wave of modern environmentalism, and not just oppositional environmentalism, but very much the positive environmentalism of what are the solutions, and even more so than that, not just what are the solutions that those at the top should implement, but how the way we're just going to go out and create the world we do want and the work that is the world which is sustainable.
Creating diversity. At this time, Mollison became incredibly active in the social field, saying, quote, "No one had any long-term ideas, and it was obvious to me what had to be done. That was to build an army of permaculture field workers to go out and teach the ideas of sustainable food production." End quote. And that is literally what he did. In 1988, Mollison published Permaculture, a Designer's Manual, where he compiled all the fundamental aspects of design essential to successfully utilizing the permaculture design system. This publication became and remains the structure and content of the 72-plus-hour permaculture design course, where individuals can become certified permaculture designers.
While Bill Mollison was taking the permaculture ideas to the world, I was only in my early 20s, and I wanted to actually ground all these ideas in the huge practicality of ecological building, of organic gardening and agroforestry systems and aquaculture and all the practical skills, as well as of course the design processes that permaculture is about. So I put myself through a really intensive self-teaching education process that has never stopped. Along the way, I've earned a very modest livelihood doing consultancy work and teaching, and in more recent years publishing. And since the mid-80s, myself and my partner Sue Dennett have been here in central Victoria developing this very modest small property of about a hectare as our home, and being involved in various ancillary and complementary projects in our local community, while occasionally venturing out into the wider world, very occasionally overseas, and mostly, I suppose, taking advantage of the amazing world that we can live a home-based, simple lifestyle that's low impact and highly resilient and incredibly rich and rewarding at home in a place away from the centres of power and wealth, and yet still be connected to the world by and have influence in the world by all the incredible advantages of modern media.
Designer, you're now a recliner. So long and thanks for the yield. And your tools left behind have all sharpened our minds to keep growing the change in the field. The future is looking quite shady under all the ideas that you've grown. And to look out the window at food in the ground gives us power to face the unknown. But trees eat us all in the end, so plant one for me when I'm gone. Then if you hear that I've died, you can tell them they've lied. I'm just shading out somebody's lawn. Tapping into the rhizomes of wisdom, you wove them all into a tale. And with seeds in your pockets and dirt on your hands, he took us into the belly of the whale. He took us into the belly of the whale. So go on and tell us another, 'cause your stories are food for the soul, helping us to see the forest for the trees and ourselves as a part of the whole. See ourselves as a part of the whole. Yeah, trees eat us all in the end, so plant one for me when I'm gone. Then if you hear that I've died, you can tell them they've lied. I'm just shading out somebody's lawn. Though the problems around us are many, the answers come to us with ease. Take care of the land, your friends and your family, and remember to plant lots of trees, 'cause trees eat us all in the end. So plant one for me when I'm gone. Then if you hear that I've died, you can tell them they've lied. I'm just shading out somebody's lawn. Yeah, well, trees eat us all in the end, so plant one for me when I'm gone. Then if you hear that I've died, you can tell them they've lied. I'm just shading out somebody's lawn.